Maria Santos woke up at 5 in the morning like she did every day. The alarm clock made a loud noise that hurt her ears. She turned it off quickly so it would not wake up her neighbor in the next apartment. The walls were thin and she could hear everything through them. She got out of bed and walked to the small kitchen. Her apartment was not big. It had one bedroom, one bathroom, and a kitchen that was so small she could touch both walls if she put her arms out wide. But there was one thing in her apartment that made her happy. In the corner of the living room sat an old piano. The piano was not beautiful. The wood was dark brown and had scratches on it. Some of the white keys were yellow from age. Two of the black keys stuck when she pressed them. But Maria loved this piano more than anything else she owned. She made a cup of coffee and sat down on the piano bench. This was her favorite time of day. For 2 hours every morning, before the world woke up, Maria could be herself. She could play music and forget about everything else. Maria put her fingers on the keys and started to play. The music filled her small apartment. She played songs that her grandmother had taught her when she was a little girl. Her grandmother had been a piano teacher in Mexico before she came to America. She had beautiful hands that moved like birds. When she played, "Music is in your blood, Maria," her grandmother used to say, "never forget that. No matter what happens in life, the music will always be there for you." Maria remembered those words every morning when she played. She played pieces by famous composers like Chopin and Bach. The music was difficult, but her fingers knew where to go. She had been playing these songs for so many years that they felt like old friends. When Maria was younger, she had big dreams. She wanted to go to music school and become a famous piano player. She wanted to play in big concert halls where people would dress up nice and come to hear her music. She practiced for hours every day, and her teachers said she was very good, but life had other plans for Maria. When she was 18 years old, her father got very sick. He could not work anymore, and the family had no money. The doctor bills were huge. Maria had to forget about music school and find a job to help her family. That was 10 years ago. Now Maria was 28 years old and she still worked as a waitress. Every day she went to Romano's fine dining restaurant. It was a fancy place where rich people came to eat expensive food. The men wore suits and the women wore pretty dresses and jewelry that cost more money than Maria made in a whole year. Maria finished playing and looked at the clock. It was 7 in the morning. She had to get ready for work. She took a shower and put on her black pants and white shirt. This was her uniform at the restaurant. She also had to wear a black apron and black shoes that made her feet hurt by the end of the day. Before she left her apartment, Maria looked at the piano one more time. She touched the keys softly. "I will see you tomorrow morning," she whispered to it. She did this every day. The piano was like her best friend. Maria walked to the bus stop. She lived in a part of the city where the buildings were old and the streets were not very clean. The bus ride to the restaurant took 30 minutes. During the ride, Maria looked out the window and watched the city change. The buildings got nicer and the streets got cleaner as the bus got closer to the fancy part of town where she worked. Romano's fine dining was in a big building made of white stone. There were flowers in front of it and a doorman who wore a fancy uniform. When Maria walked through the back door to start work, she felt like she was entering a different world. The restaurant was very beautiful inside. There were white tablecloths on all the tables and real flowers and vases. The walls had expensive paintings, and the floor was made of marble that was so shiny Maria could see her face in it. Crystal glasses hung from the ceiling and made pretty sounds when the wind moved them. Maria's job was to serve food and drinks to the customers. She had to be very polite and smile all the time, even when people were rude to her. Some customers treated her like she was invisible. They would talk about their business deals and their expensive vacations, like she was not even there, but Maria was always professional. She brought them their food and filled their water glasses and cleaned up their tables. She never complained. Even when customers left small tips or when they said mean things to her, the other waiters and waitresses at Romano's were nice to Maria. They knew she was a hard worker. But none of them knew about her secret life. None of them knew that every morning she played beautiful music on her old piano. To them, she was just Maria, the waitress who worked double shifts and never called in sick. Maria's manager, Mr. Peterson, liked her because she was reliable. "Maria is one of my best workers," he would tell new employees. "She never causes problems and the customers like her." But Mr. Peterson did not know about Maria's musical talents either. Every day at work, Maria heard music playing softly in the background. It was classical music, the same kind she played at home. Sometimes she recognized the pieces and her heart would beat faster. She would remember sitting at her grandmother's piano as a little girl, learning to play those same songs, but Maria never told anyone at work that she could play piano. She kept her musical life separate from her work life. Music was her private world, her escape from the daily routine of serving food and cleaning tables. At the end of each workday, Maria was tired. Her feet hurt and her back was sore from carrying heavy trays. But she always felt a little bit of excitement because she knew that tomorrow morning she would sit at her piano again. She would play her music, and for 2 hours she would not be Maria the waitress. She would be Maria the musician, the person she was meant to be. As Maria rode the bus home each night, she looked forward to the next morning. Music was the thing that kept her going, the thing that made all the hard work worth it. Even though her dreams of becoming a famous piano player seemed impossible now, the music was still there. It was still in her blood, just like her grandmother had said. Maria did not know that very soon everything in her life was about to change. She did not know that her two worlds were about to come together in a way she never could have imagined. The day started like any other day for Maria. She woke up at 5 in the morning and played her piano for 2 hours. But when she got to work, she could tell something was different. All the workers at Romano's were moving faster than usual. Mr. Peterson was walking around with a clipboard and looked very serious. "What is happening?" Maria asked Jenny, another waitress who had been working there for 5 years. "Did you forget?" Jenny said with big eyes. "Tonight is the Blackstone Foundation Gala. It is the biggest event of the whole year. We have been preparing for this for weeks," Maria remembered now. The Blackstone Foundation was very famous in the city. They gave money to help poor children and families. Every year they had a big party to raise money. All the richest people in the city came to this party. It was held at Romano's restaurant because it was fancy enough for such important people. "How many people are coming?" Maria asked. 200, Jenny said. "And each person paid $5,000 just to come to the dinner." Can you believe that? $5,000 for one meal? Maria could not believe it. $5,000 was more money than she made in 3 months. She tried to imagine being so rich that you could spend that much money on one dinner. Mr. Peterson gathered all the workers together for a meeting. "Tonight is very important," he said. "These are some of the most powerful people in the city. We need to be perfect. Every detail must be exactly right. If we do a good job tonight, they will tell their friends about our restaurant. This could be very good for business." He gave everyone their jobs for the evening. Maria would be working in the main dining room, serving drinks and appetizers to the guests. She felt nervous but also excited. She had never served such important people before. The kitchen workers spent all day preparing special food. The regular menu was not good enough for this event. Instead, they made fancy dishes with names that Maria could not pronounce. There was something called foie gras and lobster thermidor and beef Wellington. Everything looked like art on the plates. The dining room was decorated with white flowers and gold ribbons. Extra tables were brought in and covered with white cloths. The regular lights were turned off and replaced with candles and soft lamps that made everything look romantic and expensive. But the most beautiful thing in the room was the grand piano. It sat in the corner like a sleeping giant. The piano was black and so shiny that Maria could see the candles reflected in its surface. It was much bigger and more beautiful than her old piano at home. "They are bringing in a special piano player for tonight," Jenny told Maria. "His name is Jonathan Hartwell, and he is very famous. He has played for the president and movie stars. The foundation is paying him $10,000 just to play music for 3 hours." $10,000? Maria almost dropped the glasses she was carrying. That was more money than she made in 6 months. She looked at the beautiful piano and imagined what it would feel like to play it. Her fingers moved a little bit like she was playing keys, but she stopped herself quickly. As the afternoon went on, more and more fancy things arrived at the restaurant. There were huge flower arrangements that were taller than Maria. Expensive wine was brought up from the basement. Workers came to set up special lights and microphones. A photographer arrived to take pictures of the event. He had 3 cameras and a big bag full of equipment. This party will be in all the newspapers tomorrow, he told Maria as she helped him move his things. At 4 o'clock, the guests started arriving. Maria watched from the kitchen window as expensive cars pulled up to the restaurant. Men in black suits got out and helped women in beautiful dresses. The women wore jewelry that sparkled in the light. Some of them had fur coats even though it was not very cold outside. Maria recognized some of the people from pictures she had seen in newspapers. There was the mayor of the city and his wife. There was a man who owned 3 big hotels. There was a woman who had her own television show. All these important people were coming to eat at the restaurant where Maria worked every day. Mrs. Blackstone arrived in a long white car. She was an older woman with gray hair and a kind face. She wore a blue dress that looked like it cost more than Maria's rent for a whole year. She was the wife of a man who had been very rich, and when he died, she used his money to help other people. Everyone in the city knew who she was. "She is like a queen," Jenny whispered to Maria as they watched Mrs. Blackstone walk into the restaurant. The guests sat down at their tables and the dinner began. Maria and the other workers moved quietly around the room, bringing food and filling wine glasses. The guests talked and laughed. They talked about their businesses and their vacations to places like Paris and Hawaii. Maria listened to their conversations as she worked. One man talked about buying a new boat. A woman complained that her house was being painted and she had to stay in a hotel that only had 4 stars instead of 5. Another man talked about his son who was in college and wanted to become a doctor. As Maria served these people, she thought about her own life. She thought about her small apartment and her old piano. She thought about her father and how hard it had been when he was sick. These people lived in a completely different world than she did, but Maria was not angry or jealous. She just found it interesting to see how different people could be. Some of the guests were very nice to her. They said, "Please," and "Thank you," and looked at her when they talked. Others acted like she was not there at all. At 7:30, it was time for the music to begin. This was when the famous piano player was supposed to start playing. Maria looked around the room for him, but she did not see anyone who looked like a musician. Mr. Peterson came over to Jenny and Maria. He looked worried. "Have you seen the piano player?" he asked. "No," they both said. Mr. Peterson looked at his watch and frowned. He walked over to Mrs. Chun, the event coordinator who worked for the Blackstone Foundation. Maria could see them talking, but she could not hear what they were saying. Mrs. Chun looked at her phone and shook her head. A few minutes later, Mr. Peterson came back. His face was red and he looked very upset. "The piano player is not coming," he said quietly. "He is stuck in traffic because of a big accident on the highway." Mrs. Chun tried to call other piano players, but it is too late. Everyone else is already working at other events tonight. Maria felt her heart start to beat faster. She looked at the beautiful grand piano sitting empty in the corner. All these important people were expecting to hear music with their dinner. What would happen if there was no music at all? "What are we going to do?" Jenny asked. Mr. Peterson shook his head. "I do not know. This is a disaster. These people paid a lot of money for this dinner. They are expecting everything to be perfect." Maria watched as Mrs. Chun talked on her phone, trying to find another piano player. But Maria could tell from the look on her face that she was not having any luck. The guests were starting to notice that something was wrong. They kept looking at the empty piano and whispering to each other. Mrs. Blackstone walked over to Mrs. Chun. Even from across the room, Maria could see that she was asking about the music. Mrs. Chun spoke to her quietly and Mrs. Blackstone nodded, but she looked disappointed. Maria felt sorry for all of them. This was supposed to be a special night to raise money for people who needed help. Now it was being ruined because there was no music. She wished there was something she could do to help, but what could she do? She was just a waitress. These people did not know that she could play piano. Even if they did know, they would probably not want a waitress to play at their fancy party. Maria went back to serving drinks, but she kept looking at the piano. Her fingers moved like she was playing music, but she tried to hide it so no one would see. The beautiful piano looked so lonely sitting there with no one to play it. She did not know that in just a few minutes, everything was about to change. The dinner continued, but Maria could feel that something was wrong in the room. The guests were eating their expensive food, but they kept looking at the empty piano. They had been told there would be music, and now there was none. The room felt too quiet. Mrs. Chun was still making phone calls, trying to find a piano player. Maria watched her walk from corner to corner, speaking quietly into her phone. Each time she hung up, she looked more worried. Her face was getting red, and Maria could see sweat on her forehead even though the room was not hot. Any luck? Mr. Peterson asked Mrs. Chun when she finished another phone call. Mrs. Chun shook her head. No, I have called everyone I know. Oh, the good piano players are already working tonight. It is Friday evening, and there are many events happening in the city. The few people who are available live too far away, they could not get here for at least 2 hours. Mr. Peterson looked like he wanted to cry. This was the biggest event his restaurant had ever hosted. If it went badly, it could hurt his business for years. Rich people talk to each other. If they were unhappy tonight, they would tell their friends not to come to Romano's, Maria continued. To serve drinks and clear plates, but her mind was on the piano. She knew she could play it. She had been playing piano for 20 years. She knew hundreds of songs by heart. She could play classical music, jazz, and popular songs. But how could she tell them? Who would believe that a waitress could play beautiful music? As she walked past one table, she heard 2 women talking. I was really looking forward to the music, one woman said. They promised us a concert-quality performance. This is very disappointing, the other woman replied. For $5,000, you expect everything to be perfect. Maria felt her stomach twist with worry. These people had paid so much money and they were not happy. She wanted to help, but she was scared. What if she offered to play and they laughed at her? What if they got angry that a waitress was trying to be part of their fancy event? At another table, Maria heard a man talking to his wife. Maybe we should leave early, he said. Without music, this is just an expensive dinner. We could be home watching television. Let's wait a little longer, his wife said. Maybe they will find someone, but Maria knew they would not find anyone. She had heard Mrs. Chin's phone calls. There was no one available who could come quickly enough. Maria walked back to the kitchen to get more wine. Jenny was there, looking worried. This is bad, Jenny said. The guests are starting to complain. I heard one man ask for his money back. Really? Maria asked. Yes, and Mrs. Blackstone looks very upset. This is her foundation's biggest event of the year. If it goes badly, people might not want to give money to help children and families. That made Maria feel even worse. This was not just about a fancy party. This was about helping people who needed help. If the event failed, less money would be raised for charity. Poor families would not get the help they needed. Maria thought about her own family. When her father was sick, they had received help from a charity like this one. Someone had paid for some of his medicine when they could not afford it. If that charity had not helped them, her father might have died. I have to do something, Maria thought to herself. She walked back into the dining room and looked at the piano again. It was such a beautiful instrument. She imagined sitting on the bench and putting her fingers on the keys. She imagined playing one of the pieces her grandmother had taught her. She could almost hear the music in her head, but then she looked down at her uniform, her black pants and white shirt with the restaurant's name on it, her comfortable black shoes that were good for standing all day but not pretty to look at. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She did not look like the kind of person who should be playing piano at a fancy event. Mrs. Chung was now talking to Mrs. Blackstone. Maria could see that Mrs. Blackstone was trying to be polite, but she was clearly upset. This was supposed to be a perfect evening, and it was being ruined. "We will find a solution," Mrs. Chun was saying. "Maybe we can play recorded music through the speakers." "That is not the same," Mrs. Blackstone replied kindly but firmly. "We promised our guests, Liv. Music. They came here expecting a special experience." Maria knew that recorded music would not work. These people could listen to recorded music at home. They had come here for something special, something they could not get anywhere else. She looked around the room at all the guests. There were doctors who saved people's lives every day. There were business owners who gave jobs to hundreds of people. There were teachers and lawyers and people who ran charities. All of them had paid their own money to help the Blackstone Foundation help. Others, and here she was, Maria Santos, a waitress who could solve their problem. She had the skills they needed. She could play the piano better than most people ever could. But she was too scared to tell them. What would grandmother say? Maria thought to herself, her grandmother had always told her that music was a gift. When you have a gift, her grandmother used to say, you should share it with others. Music is not meant to be kept secret. It is meant to bring joy to people. Maria thought about all the mornings she had spent playing her piano alone in her apartment. The music was beautiful, but only she could hear it. What was the point of having this talent if she never used it to help others? She looked at the piano. Again, then she looked at Mrs. Chun, who was making another phone call. Then she looked at Mrs. Blackstone, who was trying to smile, but Maria could see the sadness in her eyes. Maria's heart was beating very fast. Her hands were shaking a little bit. She had never been so scared in her life. But she knew what she had to do. She walked over to where Mrs. Chun was standing. Mrs. Chun had just finished another phone call and was looking at her phone like she did not know what to do next. "Excuse me," Maria said very quietly. Mrs. Chun looked up. She seemed surprised that a waitress was talking to her. "Yes? Do you need something?" Maria's mouth felt very dry. She tried to speak, but no words came out. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I heard that you need a piano player." Maria said, "Yes, but we cannot find one," Mrs. Chun replied. "Everyone is busy tonight." Maria took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. There was no going back after this. "I can play piano," Maria said. Mrs. Chun looked at her with confusion. "What did you say?" "I said I can play piano," Maria repeated, a little bit louder this time. Mrs. Chun stared at her for a long moment. She looked at Maria's uniform and her simple appearance. Maria could see that Mrs. Chun was trying to decide if this was a joke. "You can play piano?" Mrs. Chun asked. "Yes," Maria said. "I have been playing for 20 years. I know many classical pieces. I could play background music for the dinner." Mrs. Chun looked around the room at all the important guests. Then she looked back at Maria. "Are you sure? This is a very important event. These people expect professional quality music." "I understand," Maria said. "I can play well enough for background music. If you do not like how I play, you can ask me to stop. Double quotes. Mrs. Chun thought for a moment. Maria could see her weighing the options. She could continue to have no music at all, or she could let a waitress try to play. "What kind of music do you know?" Mrs. Chun asked. "Classical music mostly. Chopin, Bach, Mozart. I also know some jazz and some popular songs." Mrs. Chun looked at the piano, then back at Maria. The guests were getting more restless. Some of them were starting to look at their watches. "This is very unusual," Mrs. Chun said. "But I suppose we have no other choice. Are you really sure you can do this?" Maria nodded. "Yes, I am sure." Mrs. Chun took a deep breath. "Okay, let's try it, but just background music, nothing too loud or complicated." Maria felt her heart jump with excitement and fear. She had done it. She had offered to help. Now she just had to hope that she could play well enough to make everyone happy. But as she walked toward the piano, she realized that everyone in the room was about to see a side of her that she had kept hidden for years. Her secret life was about to become public. And she had no idea what would happen next. Maria's legs felt weak as she walked toward the piano. Every step seemed to take forever. She could feel people starting to notice her. Some guests looked confused, wondering why a waitress was walking toward the piano instead of bringing them. More wine. Mrs. Chun followed behind her, looking nervous. Just play softly," she whispered to Maria. "Nothing too fancy. Just background music so people can talk during dinner." Maria nodded, but inside she was thinking about all the beautiful pieces she knew. The music her grandmother had taught her was not meant to be background noise. It was meant to be listened to and felt deeply. But she understood that this was not the right time for that kind of music. When she reached the piano, Maria stopped. For a moment, the instrument was even more beautiful up close. The black surface was so shiny she could see her reflection in it. The keys were pure white and looked like they had never been touched. This piano was worth more money than she made in 5 years. "Are you really going to do this?" she asked herself. "Are you really going to play piano in front of all these important people?" But before she could change her mind, Mrs. Chun spoke to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Chun said, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I have an announcement. Our scheduled pianist was unable to join us tonight due to traffic delays. However, one of Romano's staff members has kindly offered to provide music for us this evening." The room got very quiet. Maria could feel everyone looking at her. Some people seemed curious, others looked skeptical. She heard someone whisper, "A waitress is going to play piano?" Maria felt her face get hot with embarrassment. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she should just walk away and pretend this never happened. But then she saw Mrs. Blackstone looking at her with kind eyes. Mrs. Blackstone smiled and nodded, as if to say, "It's okay, dear." Maria sat down on the piano bench. It felt different from her old bench at home. This one was softer and the right height. She adjusted her position and put her hands on the keys. The keys felt smooth and perfect under her fingers. "What should I play?" she thought. She decided to start with something gentle and familiar. Für Elise by Beethoven. It was a piece that most people knew, and it was not too loud or dramatic. Maria took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes filled the room softly. Maria had been worried that she might make mistakes because she was nervous, but her fingers remembered what to do. The music flowed out of the piano like water from a gentle stream. At first, the guests continued talking and eating. This was exactly what Mrs. Chun had wanted, background music that would not distract from the dinner conversation. But as Maria continued to play, something began to happen. One by one, people started to listen more carefully. The conversations got quieter. Maria could feel their attention turning toward the music. She was playing the same piece she had played hundreds of times in her apartment, but it sounded different on this beautiful piano. The sound was richer and clearer. When she finished Für Elise, there was a moment of silence. Then she heard someone clap softly. She looked up and saw that it was Mrs. Blackstone. A few other people joined in with quiet applause. "That was lovely," Mrs. Blackstone said loud enough for Maria to hear. Maria felt a warm feeling in her chest. She had not played for other people in so many years. She had forgotten how good it felt to share music with others. What should I play next? She wondered. Mrs. Chun had said to keep it simple, but Maria could see that people were enjoying the music. Maybe she could try something a little bit more interesting. She decided to play Clair de Lune by Debussy. It was a beautiful piece that was not too difficult, but it had more emotion than Für Elise. It was the kind of music that could make people feel peaceful and dreamy. As she began the opening notes, Maria noticed that the room got even quieter. This piece required more feeling and expression. She had to put part of her heart into the music to make it sound right. Maria closed her eyes and let herself feel the music. She thought about moonlight on water, which is what Clair de Lune means in English. She thought about quiet nights and beautiful dreams. She let all those feelings flow through her fingers into the keys. When she opened her eyes again, she was surprised by what she saw. Many of the guests had stopped eating and were just listening to the music. Some of them had their eyes closed too. One woman had tears in her eyes. Maria realized that something magical was happening. These rich, important people were feeling the same thing she felt when she played music at home. The music was touching their hearts just like it touched hers, but then Maria started to worry. Was she playing too loudly? Was she taking too much attention away from the dinner? She looked around for Mrs. Chun and saw her standing near the wall. Mrs. Chun was watching with wide eyes. Looking surprised and pleased. When Claire de Lune ended, there was more applause. This time it was louder and more people joined in. Maria felt proud but also nervous. She was not sure what to do next. A man at a nearby table leaned toward her. "Do you know any Chopin?" he asked. Maria's heart jumped. Chopin was her favorite composer. She knew many of his pieces by heart, but Chopin's music was not really background music. It was music that demanded to be listened to. "I know some Chopin," she said quietly. "Could you play the Minute Waltz?" The man asked. "It's my wife's favorite piece." Maria looked at the man's wife. The woman was smiling and nodding hopefully. How could Maria say no? "I can try," Maria said. The Minute Waltz was a fast, cheerful piece that showed off technical skill. It was much harder than the pieces she had been playing. If she was going to play it, she would have to really focus and use all her abilities. Maria put her fingers on the keys and began. The music was like a dancing butterfly, light and quick and full of joy. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keys, playing the complex melody with confidence and grace. As she played, Maria forgot about everything else. She forgot that she was wearing her waitress uniform. She forgot that these people were rich and important. She forgot that she was supposed to be just playing background music. All she cared about was the music itself. The Minute Waltz filled the room with energy and happiness. Maria could feel the guests responding to it. She could sense their excitement and pleasure. For the first time in years, she was sharing her gift with others, and they were loving it. When the piece ended, the applause was much louder than before. Several people stood up while they clapped. Maria looked around the room and saw faces full of surprise and admiration. "Bravo!" someone called out. "That was incredible," said another person. Maria felt a mixture of joy and fear. The music had been beautiful, but maybe she had gone too far. Maybe she was supposed to stick to quiet background music after all. She looked toward Mrs. Chun, who was now standing with her mouth open in amazement. Mrs. Chun walked over to the piano. "Maria," she said quietly, "that was absolutely wonderful. Where did you learn to play like that?" "My grandmother taught me when I was young," Maria replied. "You are very talented," Mrs. Chun said. "Much more talented than I expected." Maria did not know what to say. She had never thought of herself as being very talented. She just loved music and had been playing for a long time. "Should I continue playing?" Maria asked. Mrs. Chun looked around the room at all the guests who were still looking toward the piano with expectant faces. "Yes," she said, "keep playing, but Maria. You don't have to hold back anymore. These people want to hear real music. Play whatever you want to play." Maria felt her heart race with excitement. For the first time in 10 years, someone was asking her to really play music, not just provide background noise. Someone wanted to hear what she could really do. She looked at the beautiful piano and thought about all the amazing pieces she knew. She thought about her grandmother and all the hours they had spent together making music. She thought about all the mornings she had played alone in her apartment, wishing someone could hear. Now someone could hear. Many people could hear, and they wanted to listen. Maria smiled and put her hands back on the keys. She was about to show these people what music could really be. Maria sat at the piano feeling like she was in a dream. Mrs. Chun had just told her to play whatever she wanted. For 10 years, she had only played for herself in her small apartment. Now she had permission to share her real musical gifts with a room full of people. She looked at her hands on the beautiful piano keys and thought about what to play next. The guests were all watching her now. The dinner had become less important than the music. People had stopped eating and were turning their chairs toward the piano. Maria decided to play something that would show them what music could really do to people's hearts. She chose Nocturne in E-flat major by Chopin. This was one of the most beautiful pieces ever written. It was the kind of music that could make people cry with its beauty. As she began the opening notes, Maria felt something change inside her. For the past 10 years, she had been hiding who she really was. She had been pretending to be just a waitress, just someone who served food and cleaned tables. But music was her true language. When she played piano, she became her real self. The nocturne flowed from her fingers like silk. Each note was perfect and full of emotion. The melody sang out over gentle accompaniment, like a bird singing at sunset. Maria put all her feelings into the music. Her love for her grandmother, her sadness about her broken dreams, her hope for something better. As she played, Maria noticed that the entire room had become completely silent. No one was talking. No one was moving. Even the waiters and kitchen staff had stopped working and were listening from the doorways. The only sound in the room was the beautiful music coming from the piano. Maria looked up and saw tears in several people's eyes. Mrs. Blackstone was crying openly, not caring that her makeup was running. A big man in an expensive suit was wiping his eyes with his napkin. Even the photographer had stopped taking pictures and was just listening with wonder on his face. When the nocturne ended, there was a long moment of complete silence. It was as if no one wanted to break the spell that the music had created. Then slowly, one person began to clap. Then another. Then the entire room exploded in applause, but this was different from the polite clapping Maria had heard before. This was real appreciation, the kind of applause that comes from the heart. People were standing up and cheering. Some were calling out "Bravo" and "Magnificent." Maria felt tears in her own eyes. She had never experienced anything like this. For years, she had wondered what it would feel like to play music for people who really understood it. Now she knew. A woman at a nearby table called out, "Do you know anything by Rachmaninoff?" Maria's heart jumped. Rachmaninoff was her favorite composer after Chopin. His music was big and dramatic and incredibly difficult to play. It required not just technical skill, but also great emotional depth. "I know several pieces by Rachmaninoff," Maria answered. "Could you play the piano concerto No. 2? The woman asked. "Just the beginning part?" Maria felt nervous and excited at the same time. The piano concerto No. 2 was one of the most famous and challenging pieces in all of classical music. It was the kind of piece that only professional concert pianists usually attempted, but Maria knew this piece very well. She had been practicing it for years in her apartment. It was her dream piece, the one she had always imagined playing if she ever became a famous pianist. "I can try," Maria said. "But it is meant to be played with an orchestra. I can only play the piano part." "That's fine," the woman said. "We would love to hear it." Maria looked around the room and saw eager faces everywhere. These people were no longer thinking about their expensive dinner or their business deals. They just wanted to hear more beautiful music. Maria placed her hands on the keys and thought about the opening of the concerto. It began with big dramatic chords that were like the sound of church bells. Then came a melody that was both sad and hopeful. Like someone remembering a lost love, she began to play. The opening chords filled the room with power and majesty. Maria had never played this piece on such a beautiful piano, and the sound was incredible. Every note was clear and strong. The piano responded to her touch like a living thing. As she moved into the main melody, Maria felt herself transported to another world. This was not just music, it was storytelling without words. The melody spoke of love and loss, of dreams and disappointment, of hope and triumph. All the feelings that Maria had kept inside for 10 years came pouring out through the music. The guests were completely mesmerized. No one moved, no one spoke. They were all caught up in the emotional journey that the music was taking them on. Some people had their eyes closed, letting the music wash over them. Others watched Maria's hands flying across the keys with amazement. Maria played the entire first movement of the concerto, about 15 minutes of incredibly complex and beautiful music. Her fingers never missed a note. Her interpretation was mature and deeply felt. She played like someone who had lived through all the emotions that Rachmaninoff had put into the music. When she finished, the silence lasted even longer than before. People seemed to need time to come back to the real world after the journey the music had taken them on. Then Mrs. Blackstone started to clap. But she was not just clapping, she was crying and smiling at the same time. Soon everyone was on their feet, giving Maria a standing ovation that went on and on. "That was extraordinary," Mrs. Blackstone called out through her tears. "I have never heard anything so beautiful." Other people began calling out compliments. "You play like a professional." "That was better than any concert I've ever been to." "Where have you been hiding this talent?" Maria felt overwhelmed by all the praise. She had dreamed of moments like this, but she had never believed they would really happen. She looked around the room at all these successful, important people who were treating her like she was someone special. Mr. Peterson, her manager, was standing near the kitchen door with his mouth hanging open. He looked like he could not believe what he was seeing. The quiet waitress who had worked for him for 3 years was actually a world-class musician. Mrs. Chun walked over to the piano with tears in her eyes. "Maria," she said, "I don't know what to say. That was absolutely incredible. You are not just talented, you are gifted. You belong on a concert stage, not serving tables." "Thank you," Maria said quietly. She felt embarrassed by all the attention, but also proud and happy. "How long have you been playing?" asked a man who had introduced himself earlier as a music professor at the university. 20 years, Maria replied. "My grandmother taught me when I was young, and you've never performed professionally?" he asked. "No," Maria said. "I wanted to go to music school, but my family needed money when my father got sick. I had to work." Instead, the music professor shook his head sadly. "What a waste," he said. "You have more talent than most of my graduate students. You should be performing in concert halls around the world." Maria felt a pain in her heart when he said that. She had always wondered what might have been if she had been able to continue her musical education. But she tried not to think about it too much. That was the past, and she could not change it. "Would you play something else?" asked Mrs. Blackstone. "I could listen to you all night." Maria looked around the room and saw that everyone was waiting hopefully for more music. She realized that this might be the only time in her life that she would have a chance to really share her gift with people who could appreciate it. "Yes," she said. "I will play one more piece." She decided to end with something that would leave everyone feeling happy and uplifted. She chose Fantaisie Impromptu by Chopin, a piece that was technically brilliant but also joyful and exciting. As she began to play, Maria felt like she was flying. Her fingers danced across the keys with perfect precision and grace. The music sparkled and shone like diamonds in sunlight. She played with confidence and joy, knowing that she was sharing something beautiful with people who really understood its value. This was the moment Maria had been waiting for her entire life, even though she had not known it was coming. For these few minutes, she was not Maria the waitress. She was Maria the musician, the artist, the person she was meant to be, and everyone in the room could see it. As Maria played the Fantaisie Impromptu, something magical happened in the room. The music was so beautiful and so perfectly played that it seemed to lift everyone out of their ordinary lives and into a world of pure art and emotion. The piece was incredibly fast and complex, with Maria's hands moving like lightning across the keys. But it was not just about showing off technical skill. Every note had meaning. Every phrase told part of a story. The music laughed and cried and danced, and sang all at the same time. Maria felt like she was not just playing the piano, she was becoming one with it. The instrument responded to her every touch, her every feeling. When she wanted the music to be soft and gentle, the piano whispered. When she wanted it to be bold and dramatic, the piano roared. She had never played on such a responsive and beautiful instrument. As she reached the climax of the piece, Maria's whole body was involved in making the music. Her arms moved gracefully, her shoulders swayed with the rhythm, her face showed every emotion that the music contained. She was No longer just a person playing piano, she was music itself made visible. The guests watched in complete amazement. Many of them had been to professional concerts and heard famous pianists play, but they had never seen anything quite like this. They were watching someone who was not just technically perfect, but who was playing with pure love and passion. When Maria played the final, delicate notes of the piece, her hands seemed to float above the keys like butterflies landing on flowers. The last note hung in the air like a crystal bell, and then there was silence. For several long seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. The beauty of what they had just heard was so overwhelming that they needed time to absorb it. Then Mrs. Blackstone stood up. She was crying again, but she was also smiling the biggest smile Maria had ever seen. She began to clap, slowly at first, then faster and harder. One by one, everyone else in the room stood up. The applause grew louder and louder until it filled the entire restaurant. People were not just clapping, they were cheering and calling out praise. "Bravo! Incredible! Amazing! Beautiful!" The applause went on for several minutes. Maria sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response. She had never imagined that playing music could make people so happy. She looked around the room and saw joy and wonder on every face, but then something even more surprising happened. People began to approach the piano, wanting to talk to her personally. The first person to reach her was Mrs. Blackstone herself. The elegant older woman took Maria's hands in hers and looked into her eyes. "My dear," Mrs. Blackstone said, "that was the most beautiful music I have ever heard. You have a gift from God. Where did you learn to play like that?" "My grandmother taught me," Maria replied, still feeling shocked by everything that was happening. "Your grandmother must have been a wonderful teacher," Mrs. Blackstone said. "But talent like yours cannot just be taught. You were born with something very special." More people gathered around the piano. A well-dressed man pushed forward and handed Maria a business card. "I'm Robert Chun, director of the City Symphony Orchestra," he said. "We need to talk. Have you ever thought about performing professionally?" Maria looked at the business card in disbelief. The City Symphony Orchestra was famous throughout the country. I used to dream about it," she said quietly. "Dreams can come true," Mr. Chun said. "I would like to arrange an audition for you. We have guest soloist positions that would be perfect for someone with your abilities." Another person stepped forward, a woman in an expensive red dress. "I'm Sarah Williams from Williams Music Management," she said. "We represent some of the finest classical musicians in the world. I would love to discuss representing you. With talent like yours, you could be performing in Carnegie Hall within a year." Maria felt dizzy. Carnegie Hall was the most famous concert hall in America. Only the greatest musicians in the world played there. The idea that she, a waitress from a small apartment, could ever play at Carnegie Hall seemed impossible. More people continued to approach her. A music teacher wanted to recommend her for a scholarship at the conservatory. A wealthy businessman offered to sponsor her musical education. A newspaper reporter wanted to write a story about her. A record company executive talked about making an album. Wait, Maria said, feeling overwhelmed. "I don't understand. I'm just a waitress. I work here at this restaurant. I'm not a professional musician." "You are now," said Mrs. Blackstone firmly. "After what we just heard, you can never be just a waitress again. You are an artist, a true artist. And artists belong on the stage, sharing their gifts with the world." The music professor from the university pushed through the crowd. "Maria," he said, "I need to ask you something important. Have you ever heard of the International Piano Competition?" Maria nodded. It was one of the most prestigious piano competitions in the world. Winners became instantly famous and could have careers performing with the greatest orchestras. "The deadline for applications is next month," the professor continued. "I would like to help you prepare an audition. With your talent, you could actually win this competition." Maria felt like she was in a dream. A few hours ago, she had been serving drinks and clearing plates. Now some of the most important people in the music world were talking about making her a star, but then she remembered her real life. She thought about her small apartment and her old piano. She thought about her job and the money she needed to pay rent and buy food. She thought about how different she was from these wealthy, educated people. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. "This is all very sudden. I have a job here. I have responsibilities." Mr. Peterson, her manager, had been standing nearby listening to everything. He stepped forward with a strange expression on his face. "Maria," he said, "I had no idea you could play like that. In 3 years of working here, you never said anything about music." "It was just a hobby," Maria said quietly. "That was not a hobby," Mr. Peterson said. "That was genius. And genius should not be wasted serving tables." He paused for a moment, then continued. "If you want to pursue music, you have my complete support. Take as much time off as you need. Your job will always be here if you want it, but honestly, after what I just heard, I think you're meant for much bigger things." Mrs. Chun, the event coordinator, had been quiet during all the excitement. Now she stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Maria," she said, "you saved our event tonight. But more than that, you gave all of us something we will never forget. That was not just a performance, it was a gift. A gift that you should share with as many people as possible." Maria looked around at all the faces surrounding her. These people believed in her more than she believed in herself. They saw something in her that she had almost forgotten was there. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course," Mrs. Blackstone said kindly. "But please don't take too long. The world needs to hear your music, and you deserve to live the life you were meant to live." As the evening began to wind down, people continued to approach Maria. They gave her business cards and phone numbers. They made offers and promises. They told her that her life was about to change completely. Maria sat at the piano, still wearing her waitress uniform, holding a handful of business cards from some of the most important people in the music world. She looked at the beautiful grand piano that had helped her reveal her true self to others. For the first time in 10 years, Maria dared to hope that her musical dreams might not be over after all. Maybe it was not too late. Maybe she really could have the life she had always wanted, but she was still scared. Changing your entire life was not easy, especially when you had been living one way for so long. As the guests began to leave, many of them stopped to shake Maria's hand and thank her for the beautiful music. Mrs. Blackstone was the last to go. "My dear," she said to Maria, "I want you to promise me something. Promise me that you will not let fear stop you from following your dreams. You have been given a wonderful gift. It would be a tragedy to waste it." Maria nodded, still feeling overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "I promise I will think about it," she said. Mrs. Blackstone smiled. "That's all I can ask? But I have a feeling that thinking is all you'll need to do. Your heart already knows what the right choice is." As Mrs. Blackstone walked away, Maria was left alone with the piano and her thoughts. The restaurant was quiet now, but her mind was full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine. Everything had changed in just one evening. The question now was, what was she going to do about it? The next morning, Maria woke up in her small apartment and wondered if the whole evening had been a dream. She looked at her knitstand and saw the pile of business cards that people had given her. The cards were real. Everything that had happened was real. She got out of bed and walked to her old piano, just like she did every morning. But today felt different. When she sat down and put her fingers on the keys, she thought about the beautiful grand piano she had played the night before. She thought about the faces of all the people who had listened to her music with such joy and amazement. Maria played a few scales to warm up her fingers, then began one of her favorite pieces by Chopin. But as she played, she kept thinking about what Mrs. Blackstone had said. "You have been given a wonderful gift. It would be a tragedy to waste it." Was she wasting her gift by keeping it hidden in this small apartment? For 10 years, she had told herself that she was being practical, that she was doing what she had to do to survive. But maybe she had been afraid. Maybe she had been using her father's illness and her family's financial problems as an excuse to avoid taking risks. After her morning practice, Maria made coffee and sat at her small kitchen table with all the business cards spread out in front of her. She read each one carefully. Robert Chun from the City Symphony Orchestra had written his personal phone number on the back of his card. "Call me anytime," he had written. "We need to talk about your future." Sarah Williams from the Music Management Company had written, "You could be performing internationally within 6 months. Don't let this opportunity pass by." The music professor had written the deadline for the International Piano Competition application. Only 3 weeks left. This could change your life. Maria picked up her phone several times to call one of these people, but each time she put it down again. What if they had changed their minds? What if, in the daylight, they realized that she was just a waitress who had gotten lucky for one evening? But then Maria remembered the look in Mrs. Blackstone's eyes when she had finished. Playing, that was not the look of someone who was just being polite. That was the look of someone who had been truly moved by music. Maria decided to go to work as usual. She needed time to think, and routine always helped her clear her mind. When she arrived at Romano's, everything looked the same as always. But she felt different walking through the door. "Maria," called Jenny, the other waitress. "Everyone is talking about what happened last night. Mr. Peterson told us all about your piano playing. Why didn't you ever tell us you were so talented?" "I didn't think it was important," Maria said. "Not important?" Jenny looked shocked. "Maria, Mr. Peterson said you played better than any professional he's ever heard. Some of the guests called this morning asking for your contact information." Maria felt her heart beat faster. "Really? Really? And there's more. Mr. Peterson wants to see you in his office." Maria walked to Mr. Peterson's office, feeling nervous. Was she in trouble for not focusing on her waitress duties during the gala? But when she knocked on the door, Mr. Peterson smiled at her warmly. "Maria, come in, he said. "Please, sit down. I want to talk to you about last night." Maria sat down, still feeling uncertain about what was going to happen. "First," Mr. Peterson said, "I want to apologize to you." "Apologize? For what?" "For not seeing who you really are," he said. "You've worked here for 3 years, and I thought I knew you. But last night I realized that I only knew one small part of you. I had no idea that you were hiding such incredible talent." Maria didn't know what to say. Mr. Peterson continued. "Several guests called this morning. They all wanted to tell me how amazing your performance was. Mrs. Blackstone called personally to thank me for having such a talented employee. She said it was the most memorable evening the foundation has ever had. I'm glad the event was successful." Maria said, "It was more than successful, it was magical. And that was because of you." Mr. Peterson leaned forward in his chair. "Maria, I need to ask you something. Are you planning to continue working here?" Maria was surprised by the question. I don't know. I need this job. I need the money." "I understand that," Mr. Peterson said. "But I also understand that you have opportunities now that could change your entire life, and I think you should take them." He reached into his desk and pulled out an envelope. "This is a bonus," he said, handing it to her. "It's equal to 3 months of your salary. Consider it a gift from Romano's to help you get started on your musical career." Maria opened the envelope and gasped. There was more money inside than she usually made in 3 months. "I can't accept this," she said. "Yes, you can," Mr. Peterson said firmly, "and you will. Use this money to give yourself time to explore these musical opportunities. If things don't work out, your job will be here waiting for you. But if they do work out, he smiled, well, then you'll be playing in concert halls instead of serving in restaurants." Maria felt tears coming to her eyes. She had not expected such kindness and support. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me, Mr. Peterson said. "Thank yourself for having the courage to play last night. You could have stayed quiet and let the evening fail. Instead, you stepped forward and saved the day. That took real courage." After leaving Mr. Peterson's office, Maria went home and called her mother. "Mama," she said, "something incredible happened last night." She told her mother the whole story. Her mother listened quietly, occasionally gasping with surprise or excitement. "Hey, Mihaija," her mother said when Maria finished. "Your grandmother would be so proud. She always said you had a special gift." "But what should I do, Mama? I'm scared." "What if I try to become a professional musician and I fail? What if I'm not really as good as those people think I am?" Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Maria, do you remember what your grandmother used to tell you?" "She said many things. She said that music was not just your hobby or your job. She said it was your calling. She said that some people are born to be doctors, some are born to be teachers, and you were born to make music." Maria remembered those words. Her grandmother had said them many times. "Your grandmother also said," her mother continued, "that it is a sin to waste the gifts that God gives you. If you have been given the gift of music, then you must use it to bring beauty into the world." "But I'm afraid, Mama." "Of course you are afraid. Big changes are always scary. But you know what is more scary? Looking back in 20 years and wondering what might have been if you had been brave enough to try." After talking to her mother, Maria felt a little bit clearer about what she needed to do. She picked up Robert Chun's business card and dialed his number. "Mr. Chun, this is Maria Santos. We met last night at the Blackstone Foundation Gala." "Maria, I'm so glad you called." "I was hoping you would. Have you thought about what we discussed?" "Yes. And I would like to know more about the audition you mentioned." "Wonderful. Can you come to the Symphony Hall tomorrow afternoon? I'd like you to meet our conductor and play for him. If he likes what he hears, and I'm sure he will, we can start talking about having you perform as a guest soloist." Maria's heart was beating fast, but she felt excited instead of scared. "Yes," she said, "I'll be there." After she hung up the phone, Maria sat at her piano and played a piece by Mozart. But this time, she was not just playing for herself in her small apartment. She was practicing for an audition that could change her life forever. For the first time in 10 years, Maria Santos was allowing herself to dream again. And this time, she was going to do everything she could to make those dreams come true. The scared waitress who had hidden her talents was disappearing. In her place was emerging Maria, the musician, the artist, the person she had always been meant to be. Tomorrow would be the beginning of her new life. 6 months later, Maria Santos stood behind the red curtain at Carnegie Hall in New York City. She was wearing a beautiful black evening gown that sparkled with tiny crystals. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, and she wore the pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. But despite her elegant appearance, Maria felt exactly like she had that night at Romano's, nervous, excited, and ready to share her music with people who would truly appreciate it. The audition with the city symphony orchestra had gone perfectly. The conductor had been so impressed that he had offered her a position as a guest soloist immediately. Her first performance with the orchestra had been such a success that other orchestras began calling. Word spread quickly through the classical music world about the amazing pianist who had been discovered working as a waitress. Sarah Williams, the music manager, had been true to her word. Within 3 months, Maria was performing in concert halls across the country. Music critics wrote glowing reviews calling her a natural talent with the soul of a true artist and the most exciting discovery in classical music in years. The scholarship to the conservatory had allowed Maria to study with the best teachers and to polish her technique even further. But her teachers all agreed that her greatest strength was not something that could be taught. It was the emotional depth and honesty that she brought to every piece she played. Tonight was the biggest moment of Maria's career so far. She was making her debut at Carnegie Hall, the most famous concert hall in America. The concert was sponsored by the Blackstone Foundation as part of their program to support emerging artists. Maria peeked through the curtain and saw the audience taking their seats. The hall was completely sold out. Over 2,800 people had come to hear her play. She recognized many faces from that night at Romano's. Mrs. Blackstone was sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. Mr. Peterson was there with his wife, looking amazed that his former waitress was now performing on one of the world's most prestigious stages. Jenny and the other staff from Romano's had a whole section of seats. Maria's mother and her extended family had traveled from across the country to be there. Even the music professor who had first told her about piano competitions was in the audience, but the person Maria most wished could be there was her grandmother. She knew that her grandmother was watching from heaven, proud of the little girl, who had learned to play piano at her kitchen table and had never forgotten the love of music she had taught her. "Ah," stage manager approached Maria. "5 minutes, Miss Santos," he said kindly. Maria took a deep breath and thought about the piece she was going to play first. She had chosen Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same piece that had amazed everyone at the gala. But tonight, she would be playing it with the full New York Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by one of the most famous conductors in the world. As she walked onto the stage, the audience erupted in applause. Maria smiled and waved, then took her seat at the beautiful concert grand piano. The orchestra members were all watching her with respect and anticipation. The conductor raised his baton, and the concert began. From the very first notes, Maria knew that this was going to be a magical performance. The orchestra supported her perfectly, and the acoustics of Carnegie Hall made every note ring out with crystal clarity. But more than that, Maria felt completely free to express herself through the music. As she played the sweeping melodies and complex passages of the concerto, Maria thought about her journey. She thought about all the mornings she had practiced alone in her apartment, never dreaming that anyone would hear her music. She thought about the fear she had felt when she first offered to play at the gala. She thought about the courage it had taken to change her entire life, but mostly, she thought about her grandmother's words, "Music is in your blood, Maria. Never forget that." The audience was completely captivated. Maria could feel their attention and appreciation flowing toward her like a warm wave. When she reached the famous second movement with its beautiful singing melody, she heard someone in the audience sigh with pleasure. During the dramatic finale, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. When the last chord of the concerto rang out, there was a moment of perfect silence. Then the audience exploded in the loudest applause Maria had ever heard. People jumped to their feet immediately, calling out "Bravo!" and "Magnificent!" The applause went on for several minutes, with the audience refusing to stop clapping. Maria stood up and bowed, tears of joy streaming down her face. The conductor came over and shook her hand warmly, then gestured for her to take another bow. The orchestra members were applauding her too, tapping their instruments in appreciation. After intermission, Maria played several solo pieces including the Fantasie Impromptu that had so impressed the guests at Romano's. Each piece was met with thunderous applause and standing ovations. For her final piece, Maria had chosen something special. She played Clair de Lune, the gentle piece that had first shown the gala guests what she could do. But she dedicated it to her grandmother, explaining to the audience that this was the first piece her grandmother had taught her. As the soft, beautiful notes filled Carnegie Hall, Maria felt her grandmother's presence with her. She felt connected to all the generations of musicians who had played on this same stage, and to all the people in the audience who were being touched by the power of music. When the concert ended, the audience gave Maria a 15-minute standing ovation. People were crying, cheering, and calling out their appreciation. Flowers were thrown onto the stage, and Maria gathered them up with wonder and gratitude. Backstage after the concert, Maria was surrounded by congratulations and offers for future performances. Record companies wanted to sign her. Famous conductors wanted to work with her. Concert halls around the world were calling to book her for their upcoming seasons, but the moment that meant the most to Maria was when Mrs. Blackstone came backstage with tears in her eyes. "My dear," Mrs. Blackstone said, hugging Maria tightly, "I told you that dreams can come true. Look at you now. You are everything I knew you could be." "Thank you," Maria said. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." I didn't make this happen," Mrs. Blackstone replied. "Your talent and your courage made this happen. I just gave you the opportunity to show the world what was already inside you." As Maria looked around at all the people congratulating her, she thought about how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been a waitress serving rich people at their fancy dinners. Tonight, she was a celebrated artist who had just given one of the most successful debuts in Carnegie Hall's history, but the most important change was not in her career or her lifestyle. The most important change was that she was finally living as her true self. She was no longer hiding her gifts or afraid to pursue her dreams. She was Maria Santos, the musician, the artist, the person her grandmother had always known she could be. Maria's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jenny at Romano's. "We all watched the live stream of your concert. The whole restaurant was cheering. You were absolutely incredible. We always knew you were special, but tonight you proved it to the whole world." Maria smiled as she read the message. She thought about her old life and her new life, and she realized that both had been necessary. Her years as a waitress had taught her humility, hard work, and appreciation for simple pleasures. Her struggles had given her the emotional depth that now made her music so powerful. As she left Carnegie Hall that night, walking through the stage door where so many great artists had walked before her, Maria looked up at the stars in the New York sky. "Thank you, grandmother," she whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that music is the language of the heart, and that dreams are worth fighting for, no matter how long it takes." Maria Santos, the former waitress, was now a star. But more importantly, she was finally the person she had always been meant to be. And this was just the beginning of her amazing musical journey. The little girl who had learned to play piano at her grandmother's kitchen table had made it to the most famous concert stage in the world. And everyone who heard her play knew that they were witnessing something truly special, not just great talent, but a pure and honest soul expressing itself through the universal language of music.